my fellow Americans.
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to.
Who are shouting? Just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planting information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually, the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding disinformation? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
We become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done, and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
You would know this this is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over a cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
You killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament,
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean to the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector. You didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, They get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, "I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show, but if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Well, one of the 4 principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbunda women who supposedly had been their victims.
These were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort of totally false propaganda.
The only reason that I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Tuesday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And on this show, we tend to cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. We try to give voice to those journalists who are marginalized, pushed away, held out by the mainstream media. And we've got a lot of stories we're going to cover tonight on the show, specifically a story that's gotten no attention at all because they don't want you to know about it, which is the central bank digital currencies and what's about to happen to our money supply as these globalists get their hand on the control of the tokenization process, telling you what you can use your money for, turning it off whenever they want, and how exactly this will be implanted into your body. Wait until you hear from a World Economic Forum insider on exactly how this is all going to unfold.
Plus, we are not at war with China, but we are launching a spy war with China. China says, we're not going to let you just implant a CIA network inside of China. We have a guest on today to break this down. Why all the war rhetoric when we're not at war? The guest today is Carl Zaw. I'm excited to talk to him.
Hey, Neil Murray says 1 minute late. Shocking. Just because we started the show 1 minute late, we had an audio problem. David was having an audio problem. Back up. Relax. Relax, Neil.
Not the military. We show up.
Did you have? It's a free show. Did you have somewhere else you needed to be? 1 minute late. Where are these guys coming through?
All right. They can bust our chops a little bit.
I know. I'm having fun with them. I love you guys. Anyway, yeah, we've got all of that. Plus, Dan Cohen in Spain with the dramatic elections that are unfolding there. Spain could be without a government for the next year, basically. An undecided government, a hung parliament. A hung parliament, if you will. We'll have all of that and more as Redacted starts mostly on time right now. Dan Clark says, I have a chip in my hand, a corn chip.
Okay.
That just made me laugh. Thank you, Dan Clark. Yeah, getting a chip implanted in your hand. I'll throw it out to you now. How many of you would say, yes, globalists, you can do what you want. You can implant a chip inside of my hand for all of my digital transactions. That's exactly what they want to do. That's Klaus Schwab's dream. That's his fever dream, which is now becoming a reality. Let us know in the chat if you would be down for that. I should mention, tomorrow, we are taking the day off. We're not going to be here because our son is having a birthday. So we thought it more appropriate to spend the day with him and do something special for him.
Because our baby boy, our firstborn, is turning 13. You guys, I know I don't look it, but I am going to have a teenager. I'm going to be a mom of a teenager.
And I know I do look like it. I
am so excited about it. And so, yeah, we're going to celebrate because this is a big milestone for us to have a teenager in the house.
Yeah.
So, yes, we are not going to have a live show tomorrow. We always have content for you here on the channel. In Portugal, they also, I know I'm bringing this back around to me. Yeah. They congratulate the mom on the baby's birthday because we know it's
right.
So you're free to congratulate me on that.
I was there. I was there too.
You were there.
I was there.
He went out and got a turkey sub while I was getting an epidural.
That's right. Get out of here. Doctors kick you out of here and go. Anyway, we've got a very busy show for you on this Tuesday, so we're not shirking our duty tonight. But I will mention we do have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. You should sign up for it because that's how we can stay in contact with you. But it also provides a lot of great content every morning when you wake up over your cup of coffee. All you need to do is go to redacted.inc, put in your email address, and then you'll receive a welcome email from me, Clayton at redacted.inc. Make sure it doesn't go to your spam folder or your junk folder, and you have to click there to verify it. Okay, just click there to verify that you want to receive the email, and then you'll receive the email first thing in the morning to your inbox. So again, our redacted newsletter provides a lot of value, and you can read it in about 5 or 10 minutes over your cup of coffee. So
someone in the chat says, you do look it.
Yes.
I love it. All right. Yeah, I'm excited about the stories we're going to talk about today. Also, I do realize that there is political upheaval in Israel. We're not going to talk about that specifically. We're going to talk about more peace-loving things in Israel, and I'm excited for that story at the end of the show.
Well, there's so many freaking stories today, right? You've got LeBron James' son collapsing, going into cardiac arrest as an 18-year-old basketball player. Like, that's perfectly normal. 18-year-olds, just, we don't know the details of it. He's out of the ICU, which is great that he's doing better, thankfully. A lot of questions there, of course. We have the personal chef of the Obamas winding up dead on Martha's Vineyard.
Right. Also, singer Tori Kelly has been trending because hospitalized for blood clots in her lungs, healthy in her 20s, young girl. And also the Biden's dog keeps biting Secret Service members.
Yeah. If this was, 6 people now to the hospital because of this. Anyway, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this, though. Here's a question. Would you let someone implant a microchip into your hand if you would receive $2,000 a month? A month in return for getting a chip put in your hand. You heard me right. We'll give you universal basic income, basically, 2,000 euros, $2,000 a month, if you allow us to put a microchip in your hand. That's exactly what's about to happen as part of the rollout of the central bank digital currencies. That's a carrot for them to rope you into this mess. We'll get to that part of the story in a minute, the chip implantation process, not the corn chip, as Dan said in our chat, but a actual metallic tracking chip. But a new report just published this week by the Bank for International Settlements explains how our new digital money system is about to work. We've been warning you that this was coming for a long time on this show. Also, we weren't the only ones predicting this. It was predicted in a little book, you might have heard of it, called The Bible, The Mark of the Beast. For one thing, this is how this new system would operate. According to them, the Bank for International Settlements, the new reserve currency, forget the dollar as you know it, basically. This will be the new reserve currency, which is how they want to label it and how they are labeling it. This would be used to settle all transactions. As everyone moves away from the US dollar right now, this seems like perfect timing to be moving to this new system. So are they purposefully torpedoing the US dollar in preparation for a global new reserve currency? One might wonder, right? We don't believe in conspiracy theories around here, but you have to wonder. It could include the confiscation of all property, physical property. By assigning it, every item would receive every real world item would receive its own unique digital token. So what do you guys think about this, right? This idea that they could, I'm not saying they're going to, but your car, your house, all of these sort of physical items that need a token process, you have to get them digitally tokenized in order for you to claim ownership of these items. No more selling cars without a digital token, right? No black market of selling cars. They all have to be tokenized. They all have to have a digital tracking ID to know exactly who owns them through this, what they call this transparent process.
So it's like a blockchain for the world.
Right. I mean, it would be on the blockchain, right? Everyone would be given a tokenized digital ID. And I'll explain more about exactly the tokenization process in a moment. But basically, the idea that if you don't comply with this, then we're going to take your property and tokenize it ourselves is the idea. And they won't come out and say this, but that's exactly what some people are worried about, is that they would take your items, they would take your physical property and do it for you, or confiscate it altogether if you're not willing to comply. And think of it like contraband. It would be considered contraband. Imagine trying to go through the airport or airport security with that laptop that you didn't have tokenized, so there's no digital footprint of it. Oh, what is that? What is that item that you're carrying there? Why do you have that there? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have it registered with the government. I don't have a digital ID for that item? Don't worry, we'll take it off your hands. So your digital wallet, your car, your house, your laptop, your phone, all of it assigned a digital token. Inside those tokens would be a set of rules for how each item can and cannot be used so that each person can be controlled and conditioned directly by the central bank. You've used your digital wallet to buy your allotment of beef or chicken this month, you're cut off. You're cut off. Your wallet is not limited. Your wallet is now limited until next month. And by the way, you think this is like a conspiracy theory. The Federal Reserve, literally on their website, loves and talks about the benefits of expiring currency, the expiration of currency. And hey, China's already doing it in part. So there's already limitations and expiration of currency. We already have this. And the Fed is openly talking about this on their website. Think this is a dream? Okay, just wait until it happens. Let's actually let them describe. So here is, after this Bank of International Settlements rolled this out last week, here is their tokenization process in their own words. Just watch sort of the, well, let me know if you think that this is creepy in any way. Watch.
Tokenization is more than just a digital representation of money and assets. It involves digital representation on a programmable platform, which means that tokens can incorporate the rules and logic governing transfers, as well as the information about the asset itself. Now, currently, money and other claims reside in separate databases that are connected through third-party messaging systems, meaning that transactions need to be reconciled separately before being settled with finality. Tokenization makes all this one seamless operation. Tokenization is well suited to resolve incentive and information problems. Think of an example where a buyer would like to pay when the goods are delivered, while the seller would like to deliver the goods when the buyer pays. Tokenization can solve this problem by executing both transactions at the same time.
So
two real-world applications.
So they talk about this. They talk about this tokenization as solving these problems, right? It involves the representing the ownership rights of real-world assets as digital tokens on a blockchain. In other words, you own a car, and that's confirmed because there's a digital token saying you do, and it's confirmed on the blockchain. You wouldn't need to go do title searches and all of your antiquated things like that when selling your car. It's already on the blockchain and confirmed that you own it. It's a digital certificate of authenticity. They'll sell it to us as a way to speed up the banking process, as he was just doing, as Hui Shin was just doing. Right now, there are 10 steps in order to wire money to someone. It's long, especially if you're not using your bank. Like if you're, doing a wire from like Bank of America to PNC Bank, there are multiple steps. Each bank needs to verify that you are in fact sending the money. They need to basically send a request. So now tokenization and CBDCs would wire money that can do this in one step, one verification process instead of 10 steps. So it sounds great. That's how they will sell it to us. It's easy. It's faster. But what if government controls the blockchain? And what if the main currency is a central bank digital currency run by the Fed? And you want to use Bitcoin? You want to use Dogecoin? You want to use cash? Sorry, that's outlawed now. You can't do that. Oh, you're using this illegal currency? Sorry, you're going to jail. We already see the move towards trying to get rid of digital currency that's not run by the federal government. They don't like Bitcoin. They absolutely don't like a lot of these other cryptocurrencies. Sorry, that's outlawed. You need to use America's digital currency or the EU's digital currency. That is controlled by a central power. You don't need to imagine it because it's already happening. But more importantly, it's all about the control. Buried towards the end of this report is this nugget on who would control these transactions. And again, this is why no one's covering this story, because it's nuanced and it takes time to explain this all. So you're just going to wind up one day with this thing in your wallet, a digital wallet, and no one's going to explain this to you. In this report, buried deep in this, like 40 pages deep, I stumbled across this. The governance section of a unified ledger could follow existing arrangements whereby central banks and regulated private participants take part in governance under established rules. For example, when money and payments are involved in a ledger, the central bank will necessarily play a role as the provider of the ultimate settlement asset. Its specific involvement in governance arrangements could take various forms, much as it does in the case of traditional payment systems, where public ownership, regulation, and oversight, as well as private mutual ownership, are viable options. So, in other words, the Fed will play a necessary role as the provider and the ultimate settlement decider in these transactions. So the central bank, of course, will control these transactions. And it means that it represents trillions of dollars in potential transactions of these governments. They stand to make a lot of money. And according to the report released just recently by the Global Financial Markets Association, this is the Boston Consulting Group and others, estimate as part of this report, look here on your screen, The value of tokenized illiquid assets will increase from roughly $0.3 trillion in 2022 to $16 trillion in transactions by 2030. That in 7 more years, we will jump up by almost $15.5 trillion in additional settlements. Richard Werner is an economist who is a World Economic Forum insider. Think of him as a whistleblower against these globalists. He was chosen by Klaus Schwab at the time as a global leader. Here he explains how the CBDC, or central bank digital currency, will start off on our phones as an app, but then move to something far more nefarious. An implant in your hand. Yes, a chip in your hand. Listen.
And what people don't mention is, what do these CBDCs actually look like? You know, at the moment, there's a bit of talk about this being phone-based apps. And yes, that is the initial phase. But what was already ready around 2015 is the ultimate goal. What they really want, apparently, I was told by a central banker, is, you know, CBDCs looks like a small grain of rice that they want to put under your skin, which is, in my view, a violation of human dignity. And they realize there is a hurdle. So to get people to accept this, there will be, you know, why suddenly all the billionaires saying, let's have universal basic income? Because the story is going to be, oh, now we've created this vast unemployment and disruption and crises. Well, we need universal basic income. You will get 2,000 euros into your account every month. But of course, to run this efficiently, we need to use the latest technology. So, you know, you need the CBDC chip implant.
Okay. So you get this universal basic income.
Right. That's the carrot.
But you can't actually then make any more than that. That will be like, you have to have what everybody has then.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you make more money than that, or you probably have to qualify at a certain threshold. But, you know, would you be willing to go along with, this is the question, and it's going to work.
I guess
There's
that's
gonna be
my
so many
extrapolation is like, the scary part is this becomes the Hunger Games. You just get your portion, right? And then you have no rights to anything above that.
And I think when, like we talked about it before, it's like it's going to target the poorest people because they're the ones going to be wanting to get on board with this because it's going to make life easier for them. It's like you get this stipend plus your income, and this is going to make it easier for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think this is going to work. Mm-hmm. This is how they will get people. We will put you on a universal basic income, and you will be given a certain set of parameters how you can use this income. And by the way, you're going to have to get a chip in your hand for tracking. That's how you will access it, right? And additionally, you will then you will be capped at certain purchases. Your carbon footprint will be tracked. What are you buying? Where are you going? And the idea, of course, that, oh, this is only for purchases. We won't be able to track your physical location, your whereabouts. Really? Communication, how is it being tracked? Is it Bluetooth, near field communication? I just walk up and tap it against any kind of like a soda machine. We've already seen them rolling it out at different grocery stores. We see people in Sweden are jumping on board with this, wanting to use this on a regular basis. So there's people already electing to use this, wanting to use this. And they'll do this with the promise of basic income, $2,000 a month. Would you do it? Let us know in the chat if you would do that. This is not some fever dream, by the way. Where did this come from? This was explained in great detail by Klaus Scwab himself in 2016. Listen.
Aujourd'hui, au bout de ça, on parle de puces qu'on pourra s'implanter. Ce sera quand ça?
Certainement dans les 10 années à venir. Et d'abord, on va les implanter dans nos vêtements, c'est-à-dire wearables, comme on le dit. Et après, on pourrait s'imaginer qu'on les implante dans nos cerveaux ou dans notre peau. Et à la fin, peut-être il y a une communication directe entre notre cerveau et le monde digital. Ce que nous voyons, c'est une sorte de fusion du monde physique, digital et biologique.
Yeah.
Digital and biological.
What do you guys think? Am I the only one outraged by this? They want to inject this and to be able to control our monetary policy. I know this is a little hard for some people to swallow, but they are doing it, guys. I mean, this is what's coming out with this reserve currency. This will be, and I have to ask the question, I'll ask it again. Do you think they intentionally torpedoed are torpedoing the US dollar in favor of this currency. It makes it unattractive. And they want us to move away from cash to begin with. That's been the plan all along. But I mean, the writing is on the wall here, guys.
I don't know. This is the kind of thing that I want to sort of put aside and be like, no, until I cannot any longer.
Until they're knocking at your door. We're here for your chip installation.
Right.
Natalie, where's your hand?
I guess I'm more prone to consider something like this after the pandemic, as you know,
as a reality.
As a reality.
It's like it sounds so fantastical that like you would just like brush it off as being like that's just too crazy. But then again, like I don't think it is. I don't think it is.
Yeah, given what we've been through now, it seems so a little too transparent. And who was it that? It was a singer who does these projects that sort of prepare us for futuristic endeavors, that does movie. You talked about this a long time ago. It was a lead singer from some band who does these fictional projects to prepare us for a science fiction reality movie projects.
Oh, are you talking about? Are you talking about DeLong from formerly Blink 182?
Yeah. And so that sort of puts the idea in my head that like maybe we have been warned about this through fiction for a long time. And you can think of so many cautionary tales, Gattaca, Hunger Games, all of these.
The drip, like sort of the drip feeding of it. I mean, but you don't even need like fiction now in modern days. All you need to do is look at the Bible, and looking at this prediction of the mark of the beast and this idea of being able to track. So I don't know. I mean, and this is...
I don't know if that's a literal interpretation of mark of the beast, though. I mean, the mark of the beast is a sign of evil, like a sign of, I'm not sure. If it was... maybe my interpretation is a bit more literal than that, or figurative. Is that what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, everyone in the chat is saying that, and that's, there are people saying the Bible, yes, the mark of the beast, the Bible. So is it, I don't know. We had some Bible scholars here.
I thought you had to sort of, you wouldn't just accidentally get like, or it wasn't for like just the poorest, the mark of the beast was like something deliberate, more deliberate than that, but.
More deliberate than what? Someone injecting you with a piece of...
Right. You don't just prey on people and then eat them up like the mark of the beast, right? You would get it more deliberately than that. So it doesn't just show up on people unless... I don't know. I'm just not sure how that plays out.
Scary?
What's scary?
Talk about what you're talking about right now and then add in the millions of genetically modified mosquitoes that they're releasing into Florida, Texas. We talk about being injected with things. It's like... They don't leave much open for, it's like, it seems conspiratorial, but like this stuff is happening lockstep with each other. And it's like, they're like, these people meet and they come up with these, like, these are brains that come together and think of how can we manipulate things. They know stats, they know data, and they are planning something specific, and they know exactly what they're doing. And they know how to do it through propaganda and like the things that getting people on board with these things by making it a convenience. So, I fear that a majority of people are going to fall for this just based on the convenience alone.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I should couch the fact that I was raised a Jehovah's Witness and I have read the book of Revelation many times. That faith takes it very literally. And the way that is taught is that the mark of the beast is for the non-believers, the sort of non-faith acceptors. And so you would have to opt into it as a bad person. It wouldn't just show up on all of us if we were righteous. That does not seem to be the interpretation that people who were saying this in the chat subscribe to. So I would have to re-examine that. I didn't think that it was something that could just be for all of us.
Yeah, I'm not a biblical scholar.
Okay.
So I'm not.
Okay, we unintentionally stepped in something we didn't mean to. You said mark of the beast.
I'm just saying that this has been repeated over and over again, that this is, and that I'm repeating what the chat is saying here, that this is the mark of the beast, and that this is a admission or moving away from, from Jesus Christ, I guess, and wanting to say, we'll just go along with the system. We will just become part of the system and be controlled by the system.
Okay, that much I can.
If that's,
I'm with you on that.
All right.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Fine. I need to think on that for a little bit.
Okay.
I want to think about that parallel for a while before I speak about it. Okay.
Okay, someone says we're right. Yes, okay, we're right. It's about accepting this system and sort of stepping in and allowing them to just take over. And they apparently they did say it would be in the forehead or the hand again. But nevertheless, this is the system that we're about to have. Okay, this is rolling out, and this is coming to a monetary system near you. And I think part of the problem is, because you kind of hit on it, you're like, oh, this is something I hope to maybe sweep under the rug, and maybe I won't face it until it's here. It's like, well, we can't allow it to just be here. And then it's too late. Like, we need to be vocal about it. When these governments are moving towards this, we need to tell our elected leaders, we don't want this. We don't want the control of everything that we do and the tracking of everything that we do. By the time it's here, it's too late. If it's already rolled out and everyone is reliant on this new system, then it's too late, I think. I really think it's too late. And you have this sort of universal basic income being rolled out to everyone, and they're relying on it. And then it's very hard to walk that back.
Yes, I understand what you're saying.
It's very hard to rewind the tape then and be like, oh, well, guess we didn't have a chance to talk about it like we did.
Yes, but we saw during the pandemic that most government handouts are something that bite you back. So we already know this, right? This is not new information.
But I mean, it's like, we can share this segment. You can share it on social media, push it out there, get the word out about this. This is actually happening and it's coming. So we can all say we're not ignorant about it. And we can take action about it. I think it really is troubling to me, especially what the EU is already doing with limiting the amount of cash you can use and give out to people. Like beyond $300, you're considered basically in the gray area of criminality if you're using to pay for things with more than a certain hundreds of euros for things. This is what's coming. Anyway, we have more news to get to here. I could go on and on about this all night. There's craziness in Spain with the Spanish elections. The CIA is, of course, looking to build up a new spy network in China. China says, no, that's not going to happen. And we'll get into all of that. And
plus, here's a thought experiment for you. Why is Israel, which is in the middle of the desert, why do they have a surplus of water? So much so that they give it to Palestine, to the Palestinians, rather, and they share it with the Kingdom of Jordan. Why do they have so much water, but world leaders tell us it's our fault that there is a drought because of climate change? That's a good thought experiment, right? We have a guest coming up who's going to explain that to us because he authored a book about it. So I'm excited for you to hear about that. I'm also excited for you to hear about our friends over at Ghost Bed because that is our sponsor. If you listen to this show, chances are you like to stay on top of things, but it's a lot harder to do that when you don't get enough sleep. If you find yourself tossing and turning at night and waking up groggy, now may be the time to invest in a new mattress. And our friends over at Ghost Bed are the only stop you will need. They're a family-owned mattress company that's been making mattresses for over 20 years. You can feel the expert craftsmanship when you lie down on their beds. They just don't cut any corners. Every mattress in the Ghost Bed line is made with heat-wicking material, which means you'll stay cool and sleep well, even on those sweltering summer nights. Plus, you can purchase a bed confidently with Ghost Bed's free shipping and 101-night sleep trial. Most orders ship in 24 hours, so you can start sleeping better quickly. Go to Ghost Bed now at ghostbed.com/redacted. Use our code redacted for 40% off site-wide. Once again, that's ghostbed.com/redacted and use our code redacted. China is warning that it will not sit still while the United States rebuilds its spy network inside of Chinese borders. So for a little context, between 2010 and 2012, China killed or imprisoned between 18 and 20 CIA sources. But recently, CIA Director William Burns said that the agency is going to build that back up. China says, no, you're not. We're going to watch this and make sure it doesn't happen. So joining me to discuss this is Carl Zha, an expert on Asian politics and host of the Silk and Steel podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Natalie, for inviting me.
So can you break this down for us? Why is the U.S. so brazen in announcing a spy network in China? Isn't that kind of not what you do when you have spies? You don't announce it?
Exactly. I mean, I mean, we know like this is what nation state do. That everybody spy on everybody, and we also know that U.S. intelligence agency listening in on everyone. You know, they tap the phone of Angela Merkel, and we also know NSA read our emails. You know, yours and mine both.
Yes.
But normally they don't come out in public and admit it. And so this is quite unusual. And of course, you know, as you mentioned before, just back in 2017, New York Times or Wall Street Journal, they broke out a big story that said the China decisively broke CIA spy ring in China. The New York Times estimated about 20 people got either arrested or killed, and against. In fact, a ex-CIA officer, Jerry Chong-Shin Lee, was convicted in U.S. for spying for China and sentenced to 19 years in prison. But William Burns, the director of CIA, now openly announced that we are going to build up our spy networks back up in China. So first of all, China and U.S. are not at war. You know, officially, it's not two hostile nation yet, but they're already acting as if it's already a fact. They're already acting as if Cold War 2.0 is a already given fact. And this is why they're so brazen and come out and say, oh yeah, we're going to build up our spy ring network back up in China. And of course, the Chinese Foreign Ministry is going to respond very strongly and say, no, we're not going to let you do that. So right now, what we have is, you know, the CIA working with other U.S. intelligence services and the so-called Five Eye countries. The Five Eye countries are UK, U.S., Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and these countries are the so-called Anglo Five Eyes because they all share intelligence among themselves. And U.S. is taking a lead to starting on this anti-crusade. We talked about this before. This started about from 5 to 6 years back. Actually, it went back as far as, I would say, early 2009 when Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State under Obama administration, when Hillary pioneered the so-called pivot to Asia. And when they talk about pivot to Asia, it's not a pivot of U.S. investment to Asia. It's pivot of U.S. military asset to Asia. I mean, ever since, you know, U.S. has doubled down on its containment policy versus China. We saw the formation of the AUKUS alliance with Australia. Okay, we saw the Quad, which is Japan, Australia, India, and with specific purpose of containing China, and add on top of that, we also have an economic war that's waged on China currently by the U.S. global ban of advanced semiconductor equipment to China. Whether the company, it doesn't matter whether the company is South Korean or in Taiwan or in Netherlands, they're all banned to have any kind of business with China. So now we're entering a very dangerous territory between the Sino-American relationship ever since, I would say, the 1972 Nixon visit. And this is another reason Henry Kissinger was invited back to China just a few days ago, because he was a man originally went to China in 1970 to set up the Nixon visit. And now I think the Chinese leadership is hoping to talk to him by using his whatever perceived influence in U.S. establishment to maybe talk down the war hawks in U.S. and to restore some semblance of stability in this relationship. Right now, there's really no floor in the Sino-American relationship right now. It's a free fall. And it's a very dangerous path to go down, especially when China, U.S. are both nuclear powers, and now, you know, we have the commander of the U.S. 7th Fleet openly talking about possible hot war conflict over Taiwan. You know, he said, you know, recent talk, he said, you know, we have two tasks. One is to deter China, and if that is not successful, then we're committed to fight a war. I mean, all these very, you know, this this very hostile talks so openly in public, this is not a very healthy sign in the relationship.
Now, we know that one of the things that set Edward Snowden on his path to figuring out how the U.S. government was spying was because he was asked to do a report on how China spies. And he said, well, there's no way we know this and don't do it ourselves. So he went to seek it. We know that the NSA has also planted backdoors in Huawei equipment, such as routers and switches and smartphones. We know this from New York Times reporters Nicole Perlroth and David Sanger. And so the U.S. is already spying in China, and yet we're upping the rhetoric about China spying on us. That's what those words together mean, is spying, is Chinese spying. So is this truly a both ways thing that's just already been happening? But if we talk louder about them spying on us, then we can do it with impunity?
I like to say, a lot of the talks in U.S. media about China is 100% projection. As you have pointed out, because we are already doing this to them, so we assume they must be doing it to us. I mean, that is a rationale for banning Huawei in the first place. They're banning Huawei. They say, well, the Chinese security agencies can backdoor through Huawei. Well, that's because U.S. already have backdoor through all our, tech companies.
They exploited it.
And exactly. And but right. It's, nation state, they spy on each other. That's what they do. But normally they're not so open and brazen about it. And you only see this kind of during, like, say, the Cold War, during the first Cold War with Soviet Union. But unfortunately, I think we're in a situation right now. We are unfortunately in an incipient Cold War 2.0. That's why we're not like openly talking about rooting out Chinese influence in our society, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever happened, the open market of ideas, a marketplace of ideas, right? It's now it seems like, oh my God, we can't have any kind of Chinese influence because some kind of special Chinese contagion. It touches all, it corrupts, which is totally bogus, right? And right now, that's really also a lack of confidence, I think, among the U.S. ruling elite. What is our ideas, our ideals is not competitive enough. We cannot. That's why we have to shut down any kind of alternatives. So people don't get ideas. And unfortunately, that's just where we are right now.
Well, my belief is it disadvantages all of us if we don't learn to get along, because there are advantages to be had from foreign collaborations. Now, in April, we learned about these secret Chinese police stations in New York City. We're being told about the Chinese spy balloon. Again, what is your take on those things? Is this, again, just increasing of rhetoric that they spy on us?
Yeah, this is interesting, right? The spy balloon is all over the news. And then I think just a few weeks ago, Pentagon released a statement that said the Chinese spy balloon did not collect any intelligence data on U.S. Right. So what they're saying is the Chinese spy balloon did not spy. Well, wouldn't that just make it a regular balloon, like what the Chinese officials are claiming?
Yeah.
And also the Chinese secret police station story. That's everywhere. It's in U.S., also in Canada. It's also in Australian press. They all reported it. And people did some investigation on this claim. First of all, the claim or initially surfaced their source is, again, U.S. intelligence services or Canadian intelligence services or Australian intelligence services. Part of this Five Eye network of spy services that work together. And when the people, there's some people who actually did investigation on, okay, what are actually talking about? And now these they're talking about the services that that's offered for Chinese tourists in United States, how to extend their visa, how they can how they can accommodate these the newcomers into U.S. Just help the Chinese tourists in U.S. to navigate. But right now, this is actually all this rhetoric is actually have a very negative impact, not only just on the Sino-American relationship, but before all this crazy talk about secret Chinese police station on United States, China and U.S. law enforcement actually were in cooperation together to track the fentanyl precursor chemicals that's produced by Chinese pharmaceutical companies, because those chemical precursors, they are produced as part of ingredient for normal pharmaceuticals, and Chinese pharmaceutical companies just happen to, everything is offsourced to China. So Chinese pharmaceutical company have a large global market share of making those pharmaceuticals, and a lot of the gangs based in Mexico, they are importing these chemicals from China and then processing them into fentanyl and ship them across the border. As we know, there's a big fentanyl crisis, opioid crisis in U.S. right now. So
yes,
there was
my sister used to live in Puerto Vallarta, and that's port for a lot of those illegal drugs. It's not a safe place to be for that reason.
Yeah. And so U.S. and China law enforcement agency for years has set up a program where they would the shipments from the Chinese pharmaceutical factories of these chemical precursors that could be used to make fentanyl, because for the Chinese pharmaceuticals, they just sell off these ingredients to whoever buyers. They don't necessarily follow through to see where they ultimately end up. So they had a program to track all these shipments of fentanyl, all these chemical precursors, to see where they end up. Now, because of all this crazy talk about Chinese police stations, secret police station in North America, that program has ended. There's no more cooperation among China and U.S. law on tracking those chemical precursors that could be used to make fentanyl. Which is making the crisis much worse.
Right. Okay, well, you just proved the point that collaboration with China would offer us all a lot, and this rhetoric does not. So thank you so much for your perspective on this. I really appreciate it. And you can follow Carl Zha. I like to switch my words today. It's a fun game. We can follow you on Twitter at Carl Zha, or are you now real Carl Zha? You went back and forth, right?
I created the real Carl Zha because my first account was hacked for a while.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to get it back. So I'm back.
But you're
to the
back
Carl
now.
Zha account.
Okay, at Carl Zha. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you.
And thanks, Carl. Well, that was great. And it's funny now. I guess we shouldn't say Twitter anymore. We should say what is it? What are we saying?
On X.
Or
I
on
guess.
she now? It's like X, right? Are we saying you've
Where'd you hear she?
Who did I hear today? Someone saying that.
You don't talk to people.
I do. I talk to people once in a while, but someone was saying they're calling it like sheeing now. I was like, sheeting? Hey, did you see my sheet? I was on, because of an X,
I'm not down with the lingo, I guess. I'm still, okay.
You didn't read my sheeter feed?
Did you read my X? Okay.
Get it? I don't know. Anyway, hey, we've got more news to get to here on this Tuesday.
We're going to bring you an update on Spain and how they have no elected party, no clear winner yet. We have Dan Cohen in Spain to bring us that. Also, I appreciate your hypotheses about why Israel, a country in the desert, has a surplus of water. We talked to an author who actually wrote a book about this, and it's fascinating. And I think it's a great lesson for all of us that when we are told that we are going to have these big resource wars, Kamala Harris saying that in the future, wars will be fought over water. Was that a good impression?
Yeah.
And, the grain resources that we're told that famine is coming, all of that stuff. If Israel can solve a resource problem for its own common good, then that is possible. So I'm excited for you to hear this author, Seth Siegel, to explain why, when you remove politics from global resources, there is a chance for all of us to live a peaceful existence.
All right. And also, and we're going to do that. And we're also going to talk about the Spanish elections. And by the way, I should mention, if you do subscribe to the show live, I don't really ask you to do that, but if you follow us, subscribe for free. It's totally free to subscribe to the show. Your name will pop up here on the big board. We just passed, like a few weeks ago, we passed 2 million subscribers on YouTube. We're closing in now on 400,000 subscribers on Rumble, which is really exciting. So hello to everyone on Rumble. Hello to everyone on YouTube. It'll be interesting to see what happens at Twitter/X now, as they move, Twitter is really trying to take over the video streaming platform, video producing platform, putting long form videos up there. What do you guys think in the chat? Would you guys be excited if Twitter comes along and becomes the dominant video platform? Let me know. I'd be curious to see what you guys think of Twitter, and we're streaming live on there as well. So please subscribe anywhere you feel comfortable. We'll get to, anyway. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Moomoo, because they are rolling out in Canada. That's right. They're getting ready to roll out in Canada, and very, very exciting. Our favorite trading platform is going to open their Canadian market in August, and it's going to be great. So we're going to talk about that coming up here in the next few weeks in August, but just wanted to give you a little preview, a little tidbit, little teaser there. Anyway, redacted.inc/Moomoo is how you can go right now and get up to 16 free stocks and trade like a pro with Moomoo. Right now, for a limited time, they're giving away these 16 free stocks when you open your account and you make your initial deposits. That is, even if you never do anything else with this account, and you just sit there and you get the free stocks, and you're like, hey, I opened this account, I made my initial deposit, and I'm letting these stocks grow. Because right now, they're giving away a Google stock or a Tesla stock. So you can get one or the other when you open the account and make your initial deposits. It's really great. I have alerts set for different stocks, different companies that I invest in, different commodity stocks, gold stocks, silver stocks, mining stocks. I love investing in companies that pull things out of the ground, minerals that we rely on. And it's a great way to set alerts, and really, really great. I love the iPhone app, and you can use it on your Mac or your Windows or your Android device. Very easy. So anyway, to get your 16 free stocks right now, open your account. Go to redacted.inc/Moomoo. Redacted.inc/Moomoo. Well, the future of the Spanish government is up in the air at this hour. Drama unfolding, could run to a second round of elections, and I guess a stalemate is the word of the day. Our Redacted correspondent Dan Cohen is in Spain right now with a beautiful backdrop, but the drama is unfolding all around him. Dan, good to see you. What is the very latest? No government. Seems like we could be headed for a massive amount of uncertainty there.
Yeah, it's even less clear now than it was in the final days leading up to the election. Basically, what's happened is that neither the center-right Popular Party nor the center-left Socialist Party have any clear path to power. Essentially, the Socialist Party both parties need to form a coalition in order to take power. Neither of them have anywhere near enough votes to win outright. So the Socialist Party would have to ally with not only Sumar, which is the left-wing party that was an offshoot of the Podemos party that emerged in from the Occupy movement, but it would also have to build an alliance with the Catalan nationalist movement, which is based out of where I am, which an independence or separatist movement that does not want to be a part of Spain. So there's an obvious contradiction there that this Spanish party would have to ally with a group that doesn't even want to be part of the state or part of a government. They've explicitly said, this Catalan nationalist party has said that our priority is to have independence and to have our leader, Carlos Puigdemont, who is in exile, pardoned, brought back to Spain, and the political prisoners freed, released from prison as they've been criminalized. So for Pedro Sanchez, the leader of the Socialist Party, to make some kind of agreement with the Catalan nationalists would be politically extremely difficult, and maybe even political suicide. Then you have the center right-wing party, the Popular Party, they're called, that would have to make an alliance with Vox, which is the far-right party, which even they're hesitant to do because of Vox's embrace of Spain's ugly history, the dictatorship of Francisco Franco, who was in power from 1939 until 1975 when he died. So neither of these parties have any clear path to victory. And so there's talk about, yeah, there will be even a possible second election, and that could be even a year away. So we're looking at the possibility of Spain being without a government for at least an entire year.
Vox was supposed to perform much better than it did. The far-right party was supposed to perform much better. What do you think happened there?
I think in part Vox's poor turnout is because a lot of voters who would have voted for Vox voted for the Popular Party to sort of play it safe, in the same way that happened with the left-wing parties, where people who might have voted for Sumar said, oh, we're going to play it safe and vote for the PSOE, the Socialist Party, similar to how people who might have voted for like Bernie Sanders in a previous election in the U.S. voted for Hillary Clinton, and well, we saw how that turned out. But I mean, the New York Times has pretty much declared that Vox is dead in the water. But only a couple months ago, there were regional elections throughout Spain, and Vox did remarkably well. So while it didn't do well at the national level, at the regional level, it did very well. In fact, I was just in a village in the south of Spain, in Andalusia, called Puente de Genave, and we got an exclusive interview with the new Vox mayor, who came to power in an outright majority. So and it shocked really everyone, shocked the media, and shocked him. So it's kind of like a Brexit moment, so that sort of thing. So the Vox phenomenon is very much still alive. It's just that there's also a sort of a stigma attached to Vox in the national consciousness, because it has really embraced the legacy of the Spanish dictatorship, the Spanish dictator Francisco Franco, who it's illegal. It's actually illegal to praise him here and to openly support him. So, but Vox is sort of trying to break that taboo. But despite the differences of all of these different parties, from Vox to Sumar to the Popular Party, even the Catalan nationalists, all of them are pro NATO. None of them really want to split or think about the multipolar world. So, on paper they appear to be bitter enemies, and in this kind of parliamentary democracy where you have so many parties competing and making alliances, they are all on the same wavelength when it comes to the relationship to the United States. So I think you kind of see just all these contradictions in Spain's, a Western liberal democracy like Spain, but there's actually, there's not any real choice outside of the neoliberal model, supporting the Ukraine war, following the US's lead on all things international and the like.
It is interesting to see. I thought maybe we would see more of a nationalist move throughout Europe. I know the New York Times and others have said, hey, this is a sign that no, globalism is still alive and well, that the EU bloc is still strong, that there's not this great move like in Italy towards a Giorgia Meloni and moving away from the United States, really clamping down on a multipolar world. No, see, the unipolar world is still alive and well, according to the New York Times and Euronews and others, really celebrating this idea that the right wing in Spain didn't have a clear victory.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that it's like, even if the Vox did come to power, was the second biggest party or something like that, got into the government and had prominent positions. Vox is critical of the EU. It's very critical of it. They talk a lot about the UN Agenda 2030, for example. So in the sense of that aspect of globalism, they are critical, but they're not critical of NATO. Which seems like sort of a contradiction. And if you look at the origins of Vox, they came in 2013. They splintered off from the Popular Party, the kind of center-right Popular Party, with money funding from the MEK, the Iranian opposition like cult that is very close to the United States and to Israel. So it is a nationalist movement, but I think it's a kind of fake opposition to the kind of unipolar U.S.-led order that, maybe it sells well to certain segments of the Spanish population, but it doesn't represent a fundamental break with the unipolar order, with globalism, and would look to, well, why don't we have alliances with different countries? Why don't we talk to Russia? Why don't we talk to China? Even though there's still, the New York Times and the mainstream media will still say that Vox is supported by Russian propaganda and all this stuff, but they don't criticize the Ukraine war at all. So it's kind of funny in that way.
Well, I think it's similar to what we saw. Again, I bring up Italy with Giorgia Meloni, like this idea, well, we're really going to be separating ourselves from this. They're going to really criticize the Ukraine war. They're really going to step away from this unipolar world order, step away from the United States. And of course, that hasn't happened. And there's been quite a bit of criticism leveled against Giorgia Meloni, maybe sort of this fake nationalism that's emerging through Europe right now. Dan Cohen is in Spain for us. Thank you so much for being in the heart of the drama, and we really appreciate it. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Clayton.
All right, we've got more news to get to here on your Taco Tuesday. Is it Tuesday?
It is.
Man, the days are weird lately. I'm just like, is it Friday? Is it Saturday? I don't know. Kids in camp, dogs and cats living together. It's kind of crazy. We're going to talk about, well, how is Israel managing to have an abundance of water in the desert? And how do they pull this off? It's an interesting discussion as we hear in the United States that the future wars will be around water. They want you to be scared about this because they don't want you to know the technology exists. We'll talk about that.
Whereas just today, Hillary Clinton posted on Twitter that if you're too hot because of the summer heat wave, it's a MAGA Republicans' fault. So, resource wars, climate change, those are all human-made errors that we can be responsible for. This is a really refreshing take. It's a book that I finished recently, and I wanted to invite the author on, called Let There Be Water.
So just to be clear, if it's too hot outside, it's Trump's fault.
It's MAGA Republicans' fault.
Okay.
That's literally what she said on Twitter. And, I love this idea that if everything is not political, there is enough for everybody. And when politicians tell you it's your fault, there's a drought or a shortage of food or whatever, it's actually the opposite. It's their fault.
It's also interesting, too, that the climate, the planet has been cooling over the last 20 years, as we covered here on the show a few weeks ago. So if you're too hot, who do you blame then? Because the Earth's cooling.
In 1947, Israel realized that they were going to have to deal with periods of drought and famine and that kind of thing, and that they planned for it because this is a essential component of human existence on Earth, not necessarily your fault as a human.
All right, we'll get there in a second. But first, right now, we're looking at what's going to happen tomorrow. Later this week, actually, we're going to see what the Fed does here, because we are in a very interesting moment with our economy. And what we will have, the FOMC meeting, we could see this final rate hike. And tomorrow is going to be a big market day. So keep your eye on the market tomorrow. Very, very important. And we are going to see whether or not how the Fed manipulates our currency once again. Do you want your family's future tied to the whims of the Federal Reserve and these central bankers? Or do you want to do something more stable and tangible like gold and silver, like Natali and I do, which is a big part of our investing, to make sure that we have something that protects our family's wealth, right? If you have $100, converting it out of actual U.S. currency or euros, but putting it into gold and silver, something that has lasted for 5,000 years. It doesn't have to be everything you invest in, but at least a portion of, to make sure that you're safe and secure, given what these globalists are trying to do with our money supply right now. So our friends over at Lear Capital can help you get set up with an account very easily to buy gold and silver. You can buy it and have it shipped to you or store it off-site. And all you need to do is call their 1-800 number by going to 1-800-613-3557 or go to learredacted.com. You can get your free gold and silver investor guide, and you can receive up to $15,000 in free bonus metals as well. Last year was terrible for investors, but if you had money in gold and silver, you would have been fine, actually, because as other investments fell, the stock market tanked, the US dollar was going volatile all over the place. If you had money in gold and silver, you would have been absolutely fine because it sustained itself. And we could be seeing gold hitting $3,000 an ounce. That is a price target from Bank of America. Right now, it's about $1,900 an ounce. And I think really the real play right now is silver, because silver, man, it's like half of its all-time high. Really on sale right now is silver. So I'm a big fan of silver purchases as well. And it's cheaper. It's a lot cheaper than gold. But anyway, call Lear today and they will help you get set up. 1-800-613-3557. They'll talk with you on the phone, actually. Human beings. Imagine that. Human beings talking with you on the phone in the United States. It's amazing. Or go to their website, learredacted.com. Again, learredacted.com.
Well, here's a question. Why does Israel, a country in the desert, have a surplus of water? The answer is fairly simple, but also complicated at the same time. It revolves around innovation and the removal of politics around water. I think this is a great lesson as we talk about scarcity of resources all of the time and listen to politicians discuss that too. So my guest today wrote the book called Let There Be Water, Israel's Solution for a Water-Starved World. His name is Seth Siegel, and I really enjoyed this book. He lays out many reasons that Israel doesn't have a water crisis when we are told the entire planet does. So how can they solve something that seems so unsolvable? So thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure, Natalie. I'm glad to be here. I love talking about water, and I'm glad to join your show.
Yes, because, water is something, you get a lot of clicks if the press runs a story saying we're all going to be in dire straits, there's going to be war around water, it's inevitable because of climate change. That feels like just one perspective after reading your book around a whole different paradigm of managing water. Can you explain a little bit of the history you lay out in the book about how Israel decided early and fast that water was the one thing they could not get wrong?
Sure, I'd love to do that. And I also want to comment on the sort of that apocalyptic Mad Max kind of journalistic approach to talking about water. The great thing about water and water problems is that they come at you very slowly. They come at you large, they come at you slowly. And if you are ignoring the signals you're getting, you're going to pay a big price, as we see all around the world. But if you jump on the problem soon enough, and you generally have a lot of time to do so, you will have a very easy ride, sort of what Israel has done. Now, Israel's fascination or obsession with getting the water story right begins actually before the state was founded. The state's founded in May of 1948. Around the 1920s, when there began to be a significant flow of immigrants into what became Israel, what it was under the control of the British mandate at the time, the leadership at the time understood that unless they got the water story right, they were not going to be able to absorb the immigrants who wanted to come there and also the future population that would grow there. So they prioritized three things: security. Today, Israel has one of the greatest militaries in the world. Immigration absorption. We know Israel has perhaps the most sophisticated immigration absorption system in the world. And finally, water. I mean, they did other things very well too: healthcare, education, roads. I mean, all that stuff that you have to do to be a state. But water became a high priority. And in so doing, they put budget against it. They put some of the best minds against it. And that led to a very, very good water outcome. Now, specifically, they did a few things. One is they tried to take politics out of water, as you mentioned, and ultimately turned water into basically a technocratic, apolitical administration. Second of all, ultimately, they decided on using market forces. So people in Israel get charged the real price for water. Almost no one in the United States price for water, or around or in Europe or anywhere. This is something that
we talked about when Robert Glennon was on the show. And we had a lot of Americans say, oh, yes, we do. We pay the price of water because they see on their bill a price per unit. That is the price of delivering the water. It is not the price of water. We don't know that, but that's true, right?
That's right. And that's right. And even the price of delivery is frequently subsidized because government agencies that oversee this and other activities aren't necessarily factored into that price. So the price of water in America is very, very highly subsidized. And then, by the way, and then the third thing, aside from governance and market forces, is technology, as you also mentioned. Israel, from almost the very beginning, was deeply respectful of the role of science in fixing problems. And I like to say that the Zionist revolution that created the state of Israel was not just a political revolution, which it was, of course, but it was also a sociological revolution. It was a desire to create a new approach towards governance, a new approach towards how people should live their lives, and one of which was to integrate science and technology deeply into the activities of what became the state of Israel.
Now, one of the things you say is that Israel knew right away that they were sort of diplomatically alone. They make friendships, their alliances come and go. They had briefly explored water importation from Turkey, but now they are no longer friends. So that would have really sort of left them stranded. So one of the things they do is make sure that they don't have foreign dependence. And that's something that will continue as global alliances change. That's really interesting because we see so many countries freaking out right now as alliances continue to change. Well, what about our grain? What about our water, right? And so this is another way that not just to take local politics out of the equation, but global politics.
That's right. I mean, we see this all over the world. With Turkey damming the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, it has impacts on Iraq, it has impacts on Syria, it has impacts on other countries downstream. With China in control of a lot of the Himalayan milt, it's affecting Pakistan. We see this with Singapore and Malaysia. So on a geopolitical level, you're absolutely right. Countries are looking at their assets in a wholly different way than they might have when these alliances were first formed. Israel, even militarily, Israel has the position that they, as they say, please help us procure weapons, but we will defend ourselves by ourselves. They don't necessarily need or want, even though it's a small population, they don't need or want American troops or British troops or French troops to come in and fight their wars for them. Well, it's the same thing with water. Their attitude is we will be self-sufficient, we will be independent. And that goes even to agriculture. One of the reasons why they wanted this great water story is they wanted to be independent in agriculture so that they could never be subject to a blockade of their borders by hostile states. So it's sort of a part of a national mindset that you see through the lens of water, but you also see it through other perspectives as well.
Right. I want to circle back around to this price of water, because when Israel changed the politics of water and decided to pay the price, water costs for civilians and companies went up by 40%, you say. Yes. So obviously that's incredibly difficult pain point for an entire society, and they were able to surmount it. I feel very pessimistic that any Western country would accept that, even though all of these great things happened as people stopped wasting water. It ended up being great for society. Do you think we're past that kind of solution right now?
Listen, I think that one of the problems we have is we kind of have sharp elbows out, every man, every woman, every person for him and herself right now in society. And to the extent that we could get back to something that's more communitarian, where we see ourselves as all of us together and we are solving problems together, then people are prepared to accept compromise and accept sacrifice. But I think right now where we are, I think it's going to be very hard to do that. I think we see this if you look at the Colorado River Basin. It was a long, hard struggle to get the Colorado River Basin states to agree that each should take cuts. Each one wanted somebody else to take the cuts. And I think it's the same thing farm by farm. Farmers understand that the water story is changing. Now the question is, how do they get there? And I think, by the way, that's the very important role of both government and media to help us get there. There's big changes that can be made and must be made if we're all going to have a robust future.
Right.
And we could talk about that in terms of the role of agriculture if you want. But without the role of government stepping in to help ease the way in this regard by providing financial subsidies to help change thinking, I don't think we will get there.
Yeah. And you see, we're willing to politicize Flint, Michigan, but maybe not willing to then actually pay the price or conserve ourselves. One of the things you talked about was farming just now, that Israel wanted to be agriculturally dependent. And so they started to engineer crops so that you say tomato stems were shorter, so you don't spend a lot of water growing the stem, it goes into the fruit, or the same with wheat and things like that. So they will do that kind of thing, but that is not genetically modified. And Israelis
right.
don't want genetic. Can you explain the difference between that? Because they're willing to work on genetically modified foods for other countries, but not for Israel.
No, well, actually, it's simple. Israel is a small country and a small market, and therefore they produce their seeds and they produce their produce that's going to be exported. And their major export market is Europe. And as I'm sure you know, that Europeans have a taboo about GMO, genetically modified crops, and therefore being commercial about it, Israel doesn't permit GMO because they don't want to destroy their export market to Europe. But intellectually and scientifically, they of course understand the incredible value of GMO, and they are prepared to use genetic modification where it makes sense and where it doesn't destroy their own customary marketplace. Israel, it's a wonderful story about how it got there. I didn't tell it in the book, but the seed industry of Israel, which is now one of the 3 or 4 great seed businesses of the world, really came about as a response to the Arab boycott of the farmers of Israel, and from that they built their own seed industry. It's a wonderful story and a wonderful outcome for the world because Israel becomes very smart. Now, just for a second longer, if I may, the comment you made about the wheat and the tomatoes, that is not genetically modified. That's by normal plant breeding that they created this idea, and so the leafless tomatoes and the short stalk wheat is not GMO. It's regular plant breeding, and it's really an act of genius.
Yeah.
Because why in the world should you spend, so to speak, the water that is scarce when all you want to do is grow the fruit or the wheat itself? So why waste it on roots or anything like that? And they've extended that to melons and many other crops. It's a brilliant idea, but one it took about 5,000 years for people to figure out to start doing it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Now, you also talk about drip farming, that it started in Israel, drip irrigation, and how that is something that will significantly reduce the use of water. Because in the United States, we know that most of the water goes towards farming, and a lot of it is flood farming. And then this technology of desalination, or desalination, I might be adding a syllable.
The Brits say it with the Z, and Americans sometimes will say it also, but with the Z. But the correct American pronunciation is desalination. But I've given up correcting people on that one.
Okay, all right. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how they are innovating globally to help other places do that, as well as California?
Sure. Well, Israel really is the hub of global water innovation. And it's not surprising that whether it's the idea of recycling and reusing water for other purposes, or whether it's desalination, or whether it's drip irrigation, one great innovation, and many very small ones, also come out of Israel. More recently, since I wrote the book, I can tell you that, and just so that there's no conflict here, I can say that I'm personally involved with a new-ish Israeli company, about a 7-year-old Israeli company that has invented a new form of drip irrigation, which is even more remarkable than the original one, which itself is remarkable, because this operates, as you mentioned, that the vast majority of irrigated fields, about 85% worldwide, and about 40% or so in the United States, are flood irrigated. And so that's massively wasteful. The state of Arizona is 89% flood irrigated, 89%, 830 some odd thousand acres are flood irrigated, despite the fact of 120-degree temperatures and sandy soil. It's craziness personified. But pressurized drip irrigation is very expensive to install and to maintain. So this brilliant Israeli scientist came up with this idea of what if we could use the gravitational slope of a flood irrigated field as an energy source, and purely using the force of gravity, no electricity, no diesel, what if we could propel our drip irrigation across a long field using just gravity? And this is now a going concern. I believe personally it will be the solution to not only the Colorado River Basin problems, but the River Po problems in Italy and all over the world, wherever there's scarce water and lots of flood irrigation going on. Likewise, you said, all these technologies are being inculcated and adopted all around the world right now.
Yeah. And another thing that Israel does is they treat their sewage in order to, it's really fascinating. It doesn't feel, it sounds like a gross thing. And then when you read it, you're like, oh, I'm pretty comfortable with that. In order to reuse that water for industrial and agricultural uses too. I do want to touch briefly on politics, because as soon as you talk about Israel, the subject of Palestinians comes up. You say that there is no future of Palestinians without Israeli water collaboration. And so can you talk a little bit about where that stands now?
Yeah, so unfortunately, politics, and I hope you'll agree with me with this, politics can oftentimes be the solution to things. Politics can oftentimes muck things up terribly.
Sure, and most wars just have to do with resources, right? Land, resources, women, food.
Given our time, limited time, let's not go down that rabbit hole right now.
Okay.
But, maybe on another broadcast we can do that together. But what I can say is that why I say that about the Palestinians is the Palestinians have as their neighbor, as I mentioned earlier, the world's most sophisticated water technological country. Already and quietly, the Palestinians receive in the West Bank about 60% of all their household water is coming from Israel right now. And Israel doesn't promote that. Yes, and that's by the way from Palestinian sources. That's not even. I interviewed dozens of Palestinians. I went through Palestinian archives to get this information. But about 60% of the total household water in the West Bank comes from Israeli sources. And a very large percentage, not 60%, but a large percentage of all the water in Gaza comes also from Israel. And remarkably, even when rockets are flying out of Gaza into Israel, Israel has never used water as a tool or a weapon of either of warfare to sort of coerce the other side, which I think is commendable. Israel also gives a lot of water to the Kingdom of Jordan. Yes. Now, the beauty of this is that there's no real reason why the Palestinians would ever have to try to replicate a first world industrial scale methodology and technologies as Israel has. And the Palestinians, if ever peace could come, could really expand their water profile very significantly by tapping even further into Israeli sources. Now, Israel, again, is happy to share and to sell water from its own sources to the Palestinians or others. But the Palestinians have decided to play, I believe, a foolish, self-defeating game, but others could disagree with me, of fighting what they call normalization. So anything that looks like they were cooperating with the Israelis is suddenly becomes a bad thing. So quietly, shh, don't say anything to anybody. We'll take 60% of the water for the West Bank homes, but we won't anymore allow our engineers, as happened for many years, our engineers to go into Israel proper to be trained in special Arabic language classes on how to perform the best way with the water that the Palestinians have and use. Now, and particularly the water that the Palestinians will be sourcing themselves. I'll say one more word. In Gaza, there's an aquifer that has been horribly, horribly contaminated, terribly misused by the Hamas government there. And it's a tragedy, because what they have done is they took an ancient aquifer, and by over pumping it and by not tapping it properly, and I can go into the detail of what that means if you want, but not just trust me. But so doing is seawater from the Mediterranean has infiltrated the aquifer, and the aquifer is becoming salinated, the opposite of desalinated. And it is a terrible, horrible problem. Likewise, you mentioned earlier that Israel treats all of its sewage. Israel has made repeated offers to the Palestinians to take 100% of their sewage off their hands, to treat it and either pay them for the sewage, imagine that, paying them for the sewage, or treating it and returning it to them. And again, part of this anti-normalization mentality has stopped them from doing it. So they have contaminated waterways. They dump a lot of sewage, raw sewage, into the Mediterranean. That is yuck, for no good reason. It's a real. I regard. I mean, there's many tragedies of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I regard the environmental and human costs around water to be one of the prices that everyone is paying.
Yes, thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it a lot. I guess I'm going to ask you one more question then, because this brings up the idea of global collaboration around resources. So is it your opinion, and I know you only study water, but
Hardly.
maybe a little bit of conjecture, is it your opinion that all global resources could be better managed like water, and then fears of famine and drought and things like that are more political than they may seem in the Associated Press? I know I'm asking you for a conjecture here.
Yeah, no, but it's something that I've actually thought about, so I'm happy to talk about it. The difference between water and most of the other resources, whether it's oil or copper or nickel or gold or whatever, is that there is a price for all of those. And this goes back to the role of market forces. If there was a price, a real price for water that isn't subsidized, everything would change. Infrastructure would be better everywhere.
Yeah.
Because I've talked about many different countries around the world. In India, for a large shipment of water, people pay a few rupees, pennies. And guess what? The system's leaky, it doesn't work, they can't get water on time. So you end up having to buy water from a water truck, which probably is half the time is contaminated. It creates health crises. But if you were charging the real price for the water, you would assure yourself of high quality water, you'd assure yourself of great infrastructure. But the opposite has happened. Because around the world, water is not priced properly, none of that is, or little of that is going on, or governments do as little as they can get away with doing without getting a revolt. That's not the case with most other resources, and I think that scarcity is always going to be an issue, and always a source of friction between countries. But what I also know is that technology is able to substitute one commodity, one type of product for another frequently. And therefore, when you have a real price for whether it's wheat or oil, people come up with substitutes for that. Israel is the example of where having a market price for water introduces technology. If I don't have to pay anything for my water and I have a big leak in my sink, am I going to pay $100 to have the plumber come and fix it? Well, maybe I would, but most people wouldn't.
Yeah.
And therefore, however, if the leak was costing me $101, and I could get it fixed for $100, then the rational economic person's theory says that, of course, I'll call the plumber.
Right.
And now take that example and run it through all of society and all over the world. If we could only get people to charge market price for water, including sourcing it, cleaning it, transporting it, administering it, all that, I think we'd have a very different story, but we don't.
Yeah. I think it's a great lesson in how politics affects all global resources, and not just water. But it's a great case study. Like I said, I really liked the book, and I'm going to encourage everyone to read "Let There Be Water," as well as your follow-up book, which I'm going to admit I haven't read yet. Which is was it called? It's called
Troubled Water: What's Wrong with What We Drink.
Okay. All right. Great. I'll pick that up next. I promise. Thank you again for your time.
My pleasure. I'll come back on your show. We'll talk about drinking water next. Great.
Okay. Sounds good. Good plan. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Natalie. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
That's going to do it for us today at Redacted. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, you can follow along with what we're doing, get links to the stories that we're talking about at the newsletter. You just subscribe for free, redacted.inc. Tomorrow, the 26th of July, we will not have a live show. We still will have content for you, but we won't be live because it's our son's 13th birthday. We're going to have a teenager in this house. Wish us luck. I am very excited about this. So we're taking off to celebrate our new teenager, this new stage for the Morris family. So thank you for allowing us this point of privilege and having the night off. And we will see you here on Thursday. We have more for you on Thursday. We're going to talk about the elections in Cambodia, more raging war in the East, all of that kind of stuff. So stay tuned. I'm excited for those things. We'll see you in 2 days. Thanks again, everybody. Good night.